so there's one. Let's decompress the other one now. 354. File from each one. .vbs files, right? Immediately I'm thinking this is maybe a VB script. Not that file extension means anything, right? It could be anything. And they both have different names, but again, they're very similar. And it's interesting, that almost looks like a timestamp, right? 2017, 11, 22, and 23. The archive files have a 23, the VBS files have a 22 in them. I don't know, maybe that means something, maybe it doesn't. And my goal here is to find things, pieces of information that I can act upon in my enterprise to prevent us from getting owned in general. It's a very general mandate, right? So let's look at one of these VBS files, I guess. Doop-a-doop-a-doo, 22, sure. Let's look at this one first. Oh man, okay, so this is definitely VB script, right? We see a bunch of junk, we see a bunch of variable definitions. These names are sort of jumping out at me. They've got sort of weird names, right? Like, why would you name variables like this? Let's just have a quick look through this. So, do we see anything interesting? What the hell's this? That's a user agent, right? 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 Yeah. Those of us who are on our phones and not paying it, what? This is kind of interesting. What is this crazy string? Let's look. So this looks like it's got a bunch of junk in it, but okay, so I see a // I see a colon, I see an HTTP. This is kind of interesting. And immediately I see an exe dot some junk. But this looks like it's backwards, right? And this piece right here looks like it might be the file name of an exe file, right? But it presumably has been reversed. It's been made backwards. And then it's got a bunch of other stuff here, and I don't know what the hell this is. So maybe we'll come back to that later. Got a bunch more junk, a bunch more obfuscation, right? So I'm not sure what it's going to do yet, but we've got some interesting pieces of information already. So I'm looking for things that are jumping out at me here are strings like this thing. What the hell's this? I don't know what that is, but it looks kind of interesting. Looks like the name of a file, right? That's something I could look for later. It looks like it's going to open this, and it's going to print some stuff. It's going to print its argument, right? This is a debug log function. This looks it's even got a comment. These malware authors are so wonderful to us. Don't know what this is. Valerie. Valerie is equal to some number. That's very helpful. Immediately I see other interesting things right here, like Windows script host, like scripting.filesystemObject. That seems interesting. Create object right here. This create object call is very curious to me. What else we got in here? Anything good? Okay, this is cool. This isn't even backwards. We've got a URL, right? We've got a second URL.
It even questions it for you.
It even questions it for you, like, do you mean this URL? Do you mean that URL? But a question mark is a valid character in URL encoded string, so it's probably part of the URL. So I'm not going to discount that right now. And then it's got a bunch of other obfuscated interesting stuff. There's a command.exe right there. And then it's going to do /c, which is to run a command, and it's going to go call, and maybe it's going to... So what I'm thinking of, it's got a bunch of like little fragments of bits and bobs of strings all the way through this. Maybe this is going to reconstruct something interesting and run it. What else have we got in here? Anything good? This just looks like garbage. This is just a bunch of function calls.
Dipstick. Jon Snow. Not found.
John C. Packet Pension Jon Snow. You. Okay, so that's kind of interesting. So there are some interesting things that I want to look at. I want to look at that string that looks like it's been reversed. It's been put backwards for a start. And I really want to look at those two domains, those two URLs that I saw. But first, I want to see what the difference is with the other one, right? So I'm going to diff them both. 22. Let's look at both of these files. Let's go to the top. So these are really similar. So in the dark red here, you can see the differences. So it looks like this has just been run through some sort of obfuscator. This is presumably, by the way, a generated payload. I'm not sure. Maybe it is at least it has been run through an obfuscator of some sort. But not, it hasn't been, it's kind of not different enough. Like only one word here has been exchanged, right? Pension is being exchanged with courage, but the same thing.
Pension burger versus courage burger.
Exactly. And more importantly, this long string right here, this reverse string, this string with a bunch of characters that look like they've been reversed in it, is the same. Otherwise, it would highlight. We can see no, these aren't. These are the same, except for this. You know, this. Yeah, although this isn't a long string. This is a different string. We've got to go down. There's our long string. Okay, so actually there is a difference here. If I have to unhighlight it. So we can see this red, the exe dot, this is different. So presumably this is going to write an executable or some sort of file called something.exe, and these two strings are different. So maybe this is going to write two differently named executables. But right now, that's the only difference with that. It's got the same user agent in there. Might expect that to change, but it didn't. So this is, again, this is just variable replacement, right? That's a little bit different, but that looks like it's probably a function name from earlier. We've still got the same debug function is the same. That's kind of interesting. Let's keep going. So this is really interesting. So here's our URLs, right? So this first URL is different, but the second URL is the same. Okay, well now we've got 3 URLs to look at. So let's just carry on a little bit. So that's a little bit different. That's an internal reference right there. We've got more things that are... Okay, so my conclusion here is that these 2 scripts do the same thing, basically. They're going to... They do have different domains in. That's that is pretty interesting. So let me just open one of them again. Let's do this one. So what I'm interested in first is that long string that has been reversed. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to choose... I'm going to select this string, and we're going to go over here. Oh, no. Well, hold on a second. So I'm going to use CyberChef again. I used CyberChef last time. This is a general purpose, like, text munging / demunging tool, and this thing can reverse strings. This is something you could easily do in like a Python IDE or something. But this is really nice and visual, so I thought I would show you guys. So I think I may have screwed this up because I may have copied a column number from the side of my Vim window. But basically, we can see the bits of this. So this still looks like sort of, this still looks like it's fragments of stuff, right? We've got Microsoft, XML, HTTP. Then we've got one of these little greater than signs, less than signs, who knows? Then we've got this thing. This is kind of interesting, but then it stops. We've got shell.application. That's maybe a VBScript reference. wscript.shell. That's definitely a VBScript reference, right? Process, get, temp, type. We've got a bunch of words, and they're all delimited with this little greater than sign. That's kind of interesting. And then we've got our exe file name. So we've got our HTTP, right? Maybe this will get matched up. And if I'll guess I'll spoil this for you a little bit. I did look at this script in a little bit more detail, and it does sort of pick and choose from this string in different parts of it. So when it needs the name of the executable file that it wants to save, it'll select these characters from this string. When it's going to access those URLs later, it'll select these characters in this string and then reverse it. What's up, Kyle? Question from the audience? What's up? I'm going to stare at you. Forever. God damn it. So yeah, this is an interesting little tool, so I thought I would show that. So the really interesting part is, if I can find it again, these URLs. This is pretty cool. So I haven't yet explained the code that we see where we see this actually trying to grab from these URLs. But I don't really care. It's giving me a URL. Of course I'm going to go to it. It's going to be great. Let's go here. Let's just simply wget it. I'm not even going to bother like spoofing the user agent because it gave us a user agent. We know what user agent is going to use. I don't care. Welp, that one appears to be not in DNS. Let's try this other one. Doop.
Somebody might have told me to block that domain.
Can't imagine who that was. Beep. Hey, we're downloading junk. This is pretty good. So for completeness, let's try the third one, right? Let's try the third one in this other VBScript file. What was it called? 8 something something. Let's find it real quick. Where was it? It was there. Okay, so apparently somebody's interested in letting you click on recycling center emails. What's going on there? Let's see if this one's up. Is this one up? That one's not up either. Interesting. So the one that was common between the 2 scripts is up. So we saved right here. We saved some content, right? This thing. Let's see what it is. It's got a weird name, but it's just because that was the end of the URL, right? So that's the name of the file that it saved it as. Oh, why did I do that? I always forget to put this through less. Let's try that again. Or indeed more. So let's look at the end. Let's look at the beginning. The end looks kind of interesting. Those regular patterns are kind of crazy. But look at the top. What do we see at the top? What do we see at the...
Program cannot be run in DOS.
Sure. This is an MZ header. Not only that, it also has the PE stub right there. Oh my god, this is a Windows executable file. But it's not got an exe file extension. Heavens. Well, fine. Let's... Actually, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this into our Windows sandbox and we're going to look at it. But I have to rename it first because SMB client, the command line Samba client, it will not let me transfer this file because it has invalid characters for a Windows system. So let's move it really quick. Sample. Whoops, let's call it la la la. Let's log into this thing. Let's put this file. Cool, this is awesome. It's not over there, it's over here. Computers, there it is, there's my file. Can you see that? Probably not. This is really small. But yeah, we know this is an executable file, so let's have a quick look at it in PE Studio and see what it makes of it.
Says it's an executable.
It is. I know it is, because, well, it seems to have crashed PE Studio. That's not a good sign. Maybe this VM is owned. Good thing it's VM. So, let's look at it in IDA. Let's screw this. Let's get out the big guns. Let's load the resources. Doop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doop-a-doo. It's doing stuff and crunching. Cool. Okay, so it looks like it loaded into IDA just fine. That's a great sign. And we've got code. We've got what looks like code. All right. So this is a great sign. So we've got a bunch of stuff. This looks like some sort of jump table into API calls, right? And this is interesting. It's a bunch of function calls. What else we got? This is interesting. Immediately we got a string right there. What's that going to be used for? Guess we'll find out later. This looks like a format string, right? A printf format string, or a scanf format string, a C-style format string. This is a binary blob. Who knows what this is? Maybe this is encrypted data. Not sure. A bunch of things. It's kernel32.dll. This is a library load, right? We push kernel32.dll, and then we call load library to get the memory reference for kernel32 for import resolving. Let's see what this thing has on its import tab. This is really small too. So this has a bunch of imports. This is kind of interesting. Export's probably nothing good. All right, this is fine. This is fine. So we got a global alloc. This is kind of interesting. Let's just have a look at strings, because why not? I'm not going to go super in detail with this executable. What's that?
Security check there.
There's always a security. There's always the stat cookie code that's if it's been generated by the compiler right up there. So we've got a bunch of interesting stuff. I don't know. Boring right now, right? So I don't know what this does yet. Maybe it does something creepy. I'm sure I'm forgetting something, which is why I'm scrolling through this, because I thought there was something interesting that I wanted to show you. I don't know. But let's look at the imports at the very least. So we've got a bunch of stuff that we might expect. The things that I'm interested in, I don't know if you can see this on the stream, but right here we have a bunch of imports from the WinHTTP library. We've got WinHTTP read data, close handle, write data, create URL. Read data is kind of interesting. This implies to me that this is, again, going to download more shit off the internet. So let's see if we can find out where it's going to use this.
Begin paint common? Begin paint common?
Who knows? Maybe a GUI function of some sort. Don't know. We'd have to look at it in more detail. So we can see that this is called in one place, and here it is. And this is kind of shitty. So this is in the middle of this sort of jump table type construct that we saw earlier. It's actually a bunch of different API calls, but all of the arguments are 0. This is really weird, right? We would expect this to push reasonable arguments, like the number of bytes to read, and like an HTTP request object or something. We'd have to look at the API reference on TechNet to figure out exactly what it should be pushed, what it should be called with, but it's probably not all zeros. So this tells me that during runtime, these arguments are going to get replaced on the stack, or these are going to get replaced before it makes this call, right? And it's going to push the real arguments and not zeros. So it looks like this, again, has been maybe manually, maybe automatically obfuscated to prevent people from reverse engineering it. So we haven't got a lot of time, so I'm not going to debug it today, but I would be able to get another interesting piece of juicy information out of this, right? I would get another network-based indicator of compromise that I could do something with, that I could maybe proactively block on my proxies or something. Yeah, and we could go into detail and see if this does any interesting behavioral, if we can determine any interesting behavioral patterns. You know, if this does something particularly distinctive, maybe we can make a rule in our EDR software. You know, we can figure out how to identify when something like this is running. But at the very least, what we have right now is still pretty good.
What happens when you run it? What happens when you run it?
That's a great question.
Are you going to find out?
Maybe. I don't know. Do you want to run it? I don't know. But the point is that we have got, oh no, turns out I'm still in here. We have we have one URL that we know is definitely serving malware that we can block on our border, right? We have a file hash, right? I haven't actually generated a file hash. We could generate a file hash for this. Oh, I called it something else, didn't I? We could generate a file hash for this executable. If we use a whitelisting tool, or if we use a blacklisting tool, we could put this in. If we use a whitelisting tool, we're golden already, right? Because we don't whitelist malware, right? Theoretically. And we have the hashes of the VB script, the two different VB scripts, but because in 6 emails I saw 2 different variations, so the VB script's probably going to change, whereas both of the different variations of the VB script that I found both download this same payload. So I think it's pretty valuable to be able to alert on this, maybe, right? And this is 2 weeks old. It's probably an antivirus already. I don't know. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. Let's look at it. I haven't actually looked at this on VirusTotal since I last looked at it on VirusTotal, I guess. Let's find out if it's on here. Maybe it is by now. Search. Let's search for shit. That doesn't look good. That doesn't look great at all.
Yeah, but it's only 58 out of 67.
Yeah,
it's not all of them.
Yes. Where's the first analysis? The last analysis was 12.8, which what's the date today? So this was kind of like almost a week ago. Where's the first analysis gone? Come on, VirusTotal, what's happening? You've changed your UI and now everything's bad? Am I just missing this? Like, where's the first analysis of this? What the hell, man? So we can see this has had a few comments already, right? Payload security is very prolific on VirusTotal. 11.23, that's ages ago. That is, I think that might be before we got these. I'm not sure. But yeah, this is another thing. So we've got a file hash, we can look at them on VirusTotal. If it's on there, great. Maybe we've got some information. If it's not on there, that's very suspicious, right? Maybe we are finding something new, or maybe we're just finding another variation, right? Somebody pressed regenerate payload and you've got a different hash. But at least this one that we see being downloaded by 2 different samples is on VirusTotal. That's kind of crazy. And it's got a bunch of these little hash things. So we've got, I don't know, it's got a bunch of different detections, but who cares? So my suspicion from these is that maybe it's a variant of Scarab, sure, which is ransomware. Do you want to run it? I don't know. I haven't actually run it. I have not run it and let it fly, so I don't know. We can see what happens. This looks kind of interesting. We'd have to rename it. Did I snapshot? I don't know. It's got a little dice. Oh, don't worry. I'm an administrator.
It's working.
I don't know. This is probably going to own my machine. It's already deleted itself, right? So these are all behaviors that we could see by reverse engineering it statically, hopefully. If not, we could debug it and try to find out what's going on. So my suspicion is it's probably doing a bunch of shit right now. Is it pegging the CPU? Yeah. Oh, that doesn't look good. Look at that. sevnz.exe. That's not great.
Properties.
That's not great at all. Properties. We want to see properties? This is Task Manager. This isn't going to show us nothing. It's in app data roaming. It just got written, right? This is... where is it on disk? Can I see that in here? I don't even know how to use Task Manager because it's terrible. I don't know.
Location, see users now we're at.
Yeah, it's just written this. So I didn't see it. So maybe we didn't see this in IDA, but maybe I missed it. Who knows? Maybe it wasn't there. Maybe basically the point is we'd have to look deeper into this, and we're kind of out of time. But yeah, the notion from VirusTotal that I get is this is going to encrypt my machine. Well, guess we'd better cut the demo short before my machine gets owned. LOL. So yeah, I just thought I'd give... What?
You want get all?
Yay, I want to get all my files back. Whoa, that's my personal identifier. Yay. So again, more information in this ransom note, right? I hope that we could have found this note inside the executable somewhere if we'd continued to look at it an hour later.
That's
Don't worry, guys. We can buy bitcoins. It's fine. If I'd been infected by this like 2 weeks ago, it'd be like half the price to decrypt my computer. Right? It's fine. Everything's. I'm just gonna do that. How about that? Everything's fine. Oh, you know what I should do? Also, I've been playing. I feel kind of dirty. I've been playing with Hyper-V. I feel like a bad person. It's dead. It's dead forever. Let's revert to the snapshot. Yay! We reverted from the snapshot, blah, 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 blah. That's all I got. You got any questions?
Nope.
Okay.
Who's
Somebody
next?
else?
Sweet. Nice.
Oh yeah.
We do.
We owned it this
So
time.
yeah, I hope that was kind of interesting, showing kind of what I do and the deliverables that I get, right? Stuff to look for in my enterprise. I think it works out.
So basically, if your boss is watching, you can do the same work in 20 minutes that you did in an hour today.
Oh, for sure.
You just go to
For sure.
VirusTotal.
I just look at a lot of cat news. It's fine.
You guess the hash and go to VirusTotal. It's a piece of cake.
Exactly.
Just start cat typing on the keyboard.
There's
and
not
you'll get
that
a hash.
many hashes, guys.
Yeah,
Just
there
saying.
is a finite amount of hashes. Hi, James.
Hi.
How are you doing this fine evening?
I'm doing good.
Are you
Hopefully
gonna
that works this
introduce
time.
Our next speaker, maybe.
Our next speaker is a distinguished speaker.
Repeat speaker.
Why
I don't know
is
about
it
this
slang?
distinguished.
Speaking on Burp Suite modules in a nutshell
Yeah.
is the one and only James Green. Unless that's no longer the topic.
No, it's still the topic.
Yay!
I think. Yeah. Burp Suite stuff. So, what was it, last weekend? 2 weekends ago?
Wait.
We did the RUCTF.
Oh yeah,
Right.
how'd that go?
2 weekends.
Yeah, 2 weekends ago.
What
Sure.
kind of advice would you give to our listeners?
Advice for the CTF is practice before you go and make sure that whoever your team has or is running the hardware to put your game server on, make sure it's up and running the day before.
Yay!
So, yeah, we've got more plans on that. But anyway, so for the college students that were joining us for that RUCTF event, the Auburn Hills Baker Group, I think, yeah, they were asking for, or sorry, Steve was asking for how to show them something that they might be able to use that for the CTF. First thing I thought of was the Burp Suite, just because I already had, hopefully this works, yeah, had this old website set up that I showed you at the last lightning talk, right? This is what Hillary and I went over to introduce brute forcing, right? So we basically, or I used that same website to talk about how to go through the modules for Burp Suite. So before I go too much more in depth with that, have you guys used Burp Suite before? A little bit, kind of, sort of?
Gets a little shady.
Maybe? Okay.
Yeah.
It was a shady program to begin with.
No, it's a very skilled and
I wouldn't say it's shady. I just so the whole point behind Burp Suite is it's a proxy that you can intercept website requests, modify them if you have to, and with Burp you can repeat them, do some other fun stuff. So basically, what we're gonna do is if we reload that website, I don't know why this isn't resizing right. Oh well. Make sure this is turned off. Yeah, okay.
For resolution in your VM is all? Yeah.
Right, which is what I was trying to.
It's real small. Oh god. Oh, now it's busted. Yay.
Is that better?
That is much better.
Okay.
Wow, you just start streaming in 4K.
Yeah. Alright, so first thing I'm going to do is just add this to scope.
they need more bandwidth.
Oh, come on.
Bring more hours.
This is being slow. Why is this not showing up? There we go. Okay.
Try turning it off and on again.
Yeah, pretty much just re-click everything. Alright, so right off the bat, by just reloading the page, you can see that login page that we went to. It's just login.php. And then in the same folder, yeah, we just have passwords.txt, right? Real easy to get to because I don't think the spider's turned on. Oh, yeah, it's paused. Burp Suite will go through, it'll find all the links that you're at, and we'll scan through them, try to hit them if you can, see what their requests are. So by looking at this and then looking at the response, we never actually sent it. I'm kind of jumping through this real fast, but so yeah, you find this file by right-clicking on this. You can go to repeater. Repeater will just take that same request and replay it again. So if we hit go and send this, you'll see that it has a bunch of header information that we don't care about, and then the contents of the file beneath it. And what this is just a word list, right? So to make it simple, we'll copy that. Copy. Yep, and we'll use that later. So to kind of go over what we skipped because I just found it, proxy, I have it turned off because it takes a long time to click every request by yourself. But if you turn that on, you can pause each request before it goes back to the server, modify it if you want to. For basically just trying to collect information about a website that's kind of slowing things down, so it's turned off. Spider, if you turn this on, it'll look through everything else on the website. There's a list on Burp that you can configure that'll help you find other similar web pages like index, help, example, things like that. Since we only have those 2 files though, it doesn't really matter to turn that on. Scanner is a paid feature, so if you pay for Burp Suite, it's $350. You can do like a web app scan using Burp. I've never.
One time or subscription?
It's per year, I believe. It's a subscription. I don't have it. I only use the free version. Yep. So you can do this to do scans, but like I said, I've never played with that. Intruder, we'll play with that next, and then repeater is what we just did. So
if we actually try to log in, right? So we have IAM, and let's just say IAM root or password or whatever. If you sign in with that, it says error incorrect password, and we just know that doesn't work, right? So if you just do another GET request, it'll take you back to that same thing. But we also see that we have this welcome back message at the top. This is something that I added since last time I talked about this website. So if we go back to Burp and look at the target tab, we now see there's a little drop down for login. Hopefully you guys can see that well. And we can see the request parameters that we added to this, right? So looking at the request in really small font, we see that name was IAM and password was root, right? So if we right click this, hit send to intruder, that's highlighted and we can go there. If we look at positions, all the highlighted text is things that Burp wants us to change. It'll go through another list of values, stuff like that. We don't care about the cookie, we don't care about the name because that was preset for us. So we're just going to clear all of that, re-highlight root, which is the password we typed in, and click add, right? So that highlights it, puts the weird symbols on either side so we know it's a wildcard variable that'll change. Going to the next tab is Payloads, and this is where we want to type in that word list that we found. You could use any other kind of word list like Rocky or something that's on all the Kali VMs, but just to save time, not kill my website because it's a very small server, we're just going to use these like 20 guesses, right? So doing that, we know there's going to be 23 options to try out. There's only one field, so we don't have to worry about it taking too long. So over on the right hand side, right, it has start attack. So if you click that, it should do something.
Just keep
Maybe?
clicking.
Yeah. Okay, so it's saying the free edition is demo only. It's going to slow down some of the requests, so it doesn't let you rapid fire all of these. That's fine, we only have 23 of them. Helps to have a faster computer. And now it's going through each of these requests, right? One thing you'll notice is that even though it's giving us an error message, the status code is 200, right? If you're familiar with HTTP request, 200 is okay. That means the page loaded fine, everything's the way it should be. So how do we know the difference between a good login attempt and a failed one? Well, one way you can do that is just looking at the length of the request, right? We know that when you typed in the bad password and it was incorrect, it just had that error message and nothing else on the page. It was pretty simple. We can assume that if you log in, there's going to be more content, something that was hidden that you can only see if you're a user. So if we hit that length key and sort it like that, we see that there's one that's got 200 more bytes on it, and the payload was root, right? So if we want, we can go back to the website.
Oh my god, it's I am Groot.
Yep.
Capital G.
Yep. I'm Groot with a capital G. Yep. And when you click sign in, right, you get a little dancing GIF of Baby Groot, and it should be playing audio, but
It's
HDMI, fun stuff.
It's probably blowing out of one.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's
Worth it.
Yep. It plays music. It's cool like that. So that's how you can use intruder and repeater to find a password. Yeah, pretty much. So
I guess the password before your thing did. I just want to point that out.
yeah. Yeah, it's not a very complex password, so props on guessing it faster than I can. Some of the other tabs, it's kind of harder to get this information, so I had to add on to this website to kind of do that. So sequencer, I'll just kind of talk about these and then go into what I added. Sequencer, you can take a large number of data from your requests. And when I say requests, I'm talking about like, it doesn't have a whole bunch of them. Okay, if I recorded all of those from the intruder and just had a bunch of these requests that were bad, I'm just going to type in a few more so we can see it. Right. Okay, so this is going to freak out now because I jumped pages. There we go. You'll see all these attempts, and looking at them, you can see that the cookie values are pretty much the same, which doesn't help because I'm doing it too fast. Anyway, this cookie value is what I added. So you can take this and throw it into the sequencer and compare them, see what's different, right? So let's just try sending it to the sequencer. Yeah. Okay, so this one request, we can have it in there. You can do a live capture. Probably should have done that before I ran the intruder. Basically, you can get all those cookie values, compare them, and see that they're all pretty similar, right? We didn't change a whole lot about it. If you go to the decoder, decoding is just, it's similar to what Code Chef does, but this is all in Burp Suite. If we go back to the target, look at what this cookie is. Oh, sorry, I was showing you the wrong thing. It doesn't have it. Okay, so I have a cookie called JG94, shorthand of my, like my Twitter handle, right? GreenGem94, GJ94. If we send that string to decoder, right, we can try to figure out what this is, right? Right now it's just a bunch of capital letters, lowercase letters, and then we notice at the end it's %3D, %3D, which is URL encoding, right? So we can either try to figure this out ourselves, or we can try to figure or have Burp figure it out for us using the Smart Decode button. So if you just click Smart Decode, it highlighted that last 3 characters, assuming it was URL encoded. You click Smart Decode again. Maybe. Oh, okay, it's not that smart.
Paid feature.
Maybe it's my what?
Paid feature.
Yeah, paid feature, right? Yeah, you can't do it more than once. But we can take from here is that because it's equal at the end, we can kind of guess it might be base64 encoded. So even though Burps might not be smart enough to do this, we can do it ourselves. So select base64, and we see that it popped out another line. This is all %characters, %characters. So we can assume that it's URL encoded, just like the equal signs were at first. If we Smart Decode that, we see it's a whole bunch of crap. Not sure what that is, but the Smart Decode figured out that it was gzip, right? Yeah, so it was compressed, and it decompressed it for us. So this is just flag, Deadpool, hearts, baby Groot, and then the timestamp, right? So that's the flag that people were supposed to find to kind of go through all the modules. Playing with this website, even though it was one page, you could figure out how to proxy stuff, how to spider for information, test out the intruder, how to brute force something, decode a cookie, try to find a flag that has been heavily encoded. I don't want to say encrypted. Just hidden pretty well. Let's go with that. You can also compare is similar to sequencer. You can compare 2 different cookies and see what's different. So you could find out that only the timestamps are different and the rest of the content was pretty much the same. And other than that, Burp Suite is there's a couple extensions and stuff you can look at. I've never played with them, but that's the basic modules of Burp Suite. Do you guys have any questions about that or the web page? No? Cool. All right, well, that's pretty much it then. So thank you.
So our next speaker is me. Except for I have to do some things real quick. 1 second. All right.
Oh, you're still streaming, you're just not showing it.
Good, Stu Kyle. That's not very nice. Did you stop streaming?
No, the stream is actually still alive.
He's just not showing us his screen.
Yes.
Let me make sure.
Yes, I can confirm.
All right.
And I'll make sure Sam doesn't touch it to make it the other way around.
So one of the problems when you buy expensive forensics tools is that they have licenses and dongles that tie to the machine that you use. And since it's our corporate machine, I tend to not want to show our corporate device and tools directly on the internet because there's the possibility that we show things that people might care about. But I wanted to give you guys a demo of a tool called Xways. How many people here have heard of forensic tool suites that do kind of like processing or parsing of a hard drive or a memory image, stuff like that? Yeah. So some common ones that were out there you might hear about is like FTK, NCase. A lot of law enforcement use that stuff. And Xways is another one built by a whole bunch of, I want to say Russians, that's hilarious, Germans. And it's actually a very powerful tool, and it lets you do a lot of cool stuff. One neat thing is if you wanted to capture or acquire a hard drive image, you can basically use the tool to create an image and blow this up. There's some kind of neat stuff. So you have like a lot of your classic, a raw image or an evidence file, a .e01. A .e01 is a very common format that kind of compresses things and makes it smaller. A lot of images I just do in RAW because I don't know which tool I'm going to drop it into, and some tools are okay with E01, some aren't, so it's hit and miss, but I just do RAW. One neat thing that you can do with this thing is when you're acquiring or creating a disk image, you actually have this option down here for second copy. So you could make 2 copies of the same image at the same time if you wanted to. This is useful if you're doing a lot of legal cases and you need to make an image here and an image here just for kind of redundancy, things like that. So that's kind of neat stuff, and there's actually a ton of other options when it just comes to those. You also, when you create your image or you acquire it, you can actually have it automatically create your hash. So when you start using this tool, it actually makes an audit trail for you. That becomes important because if you're doing chain of custody, that type of information will be recorded automatically for you when you're creating this. So it saves you a step. But that's not really the exciting stuff of why this tool is fantastic. Once you actually have an image, you can very easily kind of create a new case and you add an image file to it. And what's kind of unique, there's a lot of tools out there that as you create a hard drive image and then you import it into a new tool, it's going to start like parsing it. Now remind you that to acquire a hard drive image of 500 gigabytes, you're looking at like several hours where you as an analyst is just sitting there like da, 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 waiting for this to get done, da, 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 right? You're wasting time. What's neat about Xways is you can create your image. So it starts to create that image, start putting it to whatever location you want to, and at the same time you can bring up Xways again, and you can basically do like live analysis on it. Now like live analysis on the drive that you're imaging isn't really anything new, but what's unique is as you're in this tool and you're finding cool things and you can tag them, be like, this thing looks evil, tag. This looks evil, tag. When you get done, you can actually right click in your case and you have this cool little item here called replace with a new image. So you can actually swap out from the work you were doing before that was on a live hard drive image that you were connected to, and you can swap out the image you just created, and all the work you just did for tagging kind of unique things and everything like that gets applied on top of it. Just kind of neat, something nifty.
So you wouldn't work on the image as it's being rendered in progress, you'd work live on the
Correct.
target while it's simultaneously being imaged at the same time.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's cool.
It's neat. It's kind of neat. And there's some other tools that do things like that, but the issue that always happens is that you have to take an image first, right? And that image takes time. You're looking anywhere, if it's on a network, 500 gigs on a network, it could be anywhere from 6 to 24 hours depending on your network speeds. What is pretty cool is there's a guy named Eric Zimmerman who did a whole bunch of bench testing on all these different forensic tools, doing acquisition, doing processing, doing word searches. And Xways in a lot of these scenarios came out on top as being some of the fastest. I actually acquired a 500 gigabyte drive image over our network in 4 hours. Magic, apparently. But kind of neat. So when you pop open a drive, you basically add it in here, and then you get this giant listing, right? This just looks like File Explorer. The same thing you see when you open File Explorer. You got all your files there, there's a user directory. But Xways kind of works in this view here in the middle where anything that's in this window is basically what you filter on. So to give you an idea, is we actually explore recursively across the entire drive. So every single file on this hard drive image, this is a 500 gig drive, is now basically in this single pane. So you can search around for every single one of these things, you know, just spend days and days and days looking at files. What's neat about this is at this point, if I wanted to just look at, for example, where'd he go? Oh God. 1 second. Zoom it is not always the best. Oh, it's not gonna let me do it. Dang it. Yeah. So anyway, if we kick like across these, we have a variety of categories. Hold on, it's being a jerk. German engineering. Hold on.
It's very efficient, thank you.
Yeah.
For those of us on YouTube, Kyle is failing to use his computer right now.
Oh yeah. So, if we wanted to, let's see, so if you wanted to change the columns that you view when you're looking at all this data, you secretly just click in this random area above. Ta-da! Magic. German engineering.
Seemingly random.
Yep. Now, is it going to let me, why is it not letting me scroll all the way over? That's kind of annoying. Zoom it and zoom it. That's a problem.
See it.
Can you guys see it though?
Yes.
All right, cool. That'll work. Yeah, so here's where you have checkbox galore. You actually have a three-way checkbox in this thing, where you have an unchecked, a half-checked, and a full-checked state. Each one of those options can mean very different things.
Half check?
A half-check.
What
German
does a half
engineering.
check look like? Is it the little square?
Yep. Half-check.
That doesn't look much like a check.
It's a half-check.
It's filling up more of the box than the check.
It's the half-check.
Stop arguing,
Yes. Anyway.
I call it the radio button.
So on this massive column of all this junk over here, these are actually all the columns that you can enable. How do you enable them? Oh, it's really weird. You just click on the name.
And it doesn't work.
There you go.
There it is.
See how it says 60? Yep. That's how you show and unshow columns. Now, if you're feeling like this interface is like an NT program from like Windows XP, it kind of is.
Probably because it was.
It's not. It's actually up to date, and it's just this is the interface they went with. Also, you can't sort this column. So you basically, as you use this tool, you get used to finding which columns you want to enable and disable, and you look in here.
What's the difference between the two that are marked hash at the bottom?
I think hash one is like so you have hash lists that you can import, and you can enable and disable them, I believe.
Cool.
Yeah.
They're both labeled identically in the UI here.
Well, one is
Except there's a
hash one and hash two.
That's way too small. I can't see that.
Maybe
But-
if you could
so let's-
zoom in it.
So let's look at one of the cool things that you can do with this tool. So again, we haven't done any parsing, we haven't done any indexing. And both of those things usually take a lot of time when you're using a forensics tool or in an investigation. So a question comes up and says, hey, I need you to pull out every single document that's on this machine. So how would you do that? So
Files are in the computer, right?
you would write like a script, or you would then do some type of search to find every .doc or .x. This actually, in the categories, you can simply click on here, and this is a lot of the categories that auto generates. And so you can see that there's a whole bunch of timestamp, or not timestamp, how many items it's already found on this hard drive image. So,
108,000 programs.
yep. So if we wanted to see all the text and word processing, we click that. Click OK, and there they all are. And so this will be a combination of every kind of Word doc, Domino, a lot of these Word files. Then all you need to do is simply Control A, right click, and basically copy, recover. Copy, recover will allow you to then export all those out. And because it's fine German engineering, you can also do a second copy if required. And when you copy it out, you have an option.
Does this also have a hat check?
Yep, it sure does. Do you see this unchecked, checked, half checked?
No.
So there's different options you can do for if you want to just export everything into the same directory with like a prefix at the end of it. So that each name is going to be unique. Or it'll just recreate the entire folder structure. So depending on what you want, you can do those options. This is really helpful for a lot of code of conduct investigations we do because, for example, like HR, compliance, or someone else may be, we need to get every document off that system. So we're like, okay, click, enter, done. So it's very, very quick to do that type of operation.
So the reason that it does this renaming is so that if it has files in different folders that are named the same thing, it won't overwrite them.
Yep. If you want everything in one directory, if you want to retain the directory structure, then the files are already on NTFS, so they're not going to rename each other. So it's just some options you can do. Another really neat thing is if we're looking around, let's say we actually have a little hex editor that's built in. So this hex editor, remember Daniel was talking about that wonderful MZ header? What if we wanted to find all files on the system that have an MZ header? So this is just going to parse through, or it's going to look for every single file on this image that has MZ. So I can actually go through here, do a little bit of madness with this copy block, and I do this grep hex. Essentially, it creates a hex greppable string. I can go over to our wonderful search, and I can just drop in here, bam. And I just have to make sure that I do a full check on this grep syntax. I hit OK, and ba-jam.
I'm going to start calling them fake checks.
Right? Except for...
So this found a bunch of other stuff. Is it still searching? Or did you do too many
Did it
lines?
actually find something?
Well, hold on. I might have...
It looks like you only highlighted the M.
It's probably in some display somewhere that peeps can't see it.
Yeah, it's being weird. But essentially that'll allow you to see all of this. Now, at this point you might actually want to do some parsing. And that's another place where this tool is very, very powerful. So again, if you're not searching for your own things, or again, a useful piece of that hex editor, and the reason you can kind of highlight things in there and either search for them, you can also tag them as well. So there's a whole tagging system for when you create a report using XWays. And for example, if you found a piece of a file or something else out there, maybe it had a key in it, or it had decrypt key, passwords, things like that, in a weird format, you could actually highlight them and add them to your evidence file and export them out later. Some other neat things is if you're ever doing a lot of forensics, sometimes you might actually need to grab all the registry files. You can simply just click registry files, and then there's every single registry file that's on the system, every .reg and beyond. Then you can quickly export those over, use your favorite parsing tool, and get all types of data. So it's just a very kind of handy tool in that fashion. The next piece is the specialist, or refined volume snapshot. This is really where the real meat and potatoes of the tool are. So again, remember how we were talking about some file header signatures that you could search for? This allows you to, so this is all the predefined file types and the headers that it's going to look for. So you could add your own in here if you had something. Let's say you found a piece of malware that's got a unique file header. You could add this into it, and now it's going to carve it out and put it into its own.
This is kind of cool. You could essentially put like AV signatures in here. For those of us on YouTube, we're looking at a file which has file types and then basically byte strings that it will match on.
Yep. So it's pretty neat what you can do there. And that's just a piece of it. You can also do picture analysis and processing, so it'll carve out for pictures. And this is pretty neat because it goes all the way down to the sector level on a hard drive for all the data. And it's carving basically from the start to the end. If there's unallocated space after it, it'll actually continue parsing that just to see if like a file changed sizes and it made it smaller, there might be something in unallocated space. And so it'll also carve all that out as well.
So this might find like an executable appended on the end of a PNG file that has a bunch of nulls in between the end
Yep.
of the picture or something like that? As a separate file? Heavens.
Right?
I'm learning things. This is awesome.
So again, when we go to do this, that text file that has all the editing in it, we can also just look in here and just select, I want to carve out documents, I want to carve out pictures, I want to carve out this. So if we want to look at all internet activity, for example, it actually didn't find any. Sad news. Oh, probably because I was just on registry. Again, remember, this is going to be everything that you're looking at in your view. Alright, so let's see, go ahead and parse out that. And for a 500 gig image, this may not complete in the time that we have. But this type of search, doing it in other tools, can take several hours. Some of the searches I've done so far, even though like a 500 gig image like this, it's gotten done in a couple of them I did that were a little smaller, were like 15 minutes. For something like this, because you're carving, it could be about an hour. This one's showing 66 minutes left. Just very, very powerful. And once you're done, if you let that complete, you'll see that there's additional items that will be added to snapshot. So right here you see that there's a plus 57. So it found 57 more things. Well, again, we're kind of in a single view, so how would we want to see that stuff that we just carved out? Ha ha! Check boxes. So if I find it, so this internal ID, we can actually search on this. This is kind of a unique identifier that Xways is giving to all these files. So if I actually just look for the last highest and hit activate, this actually filters out on just the things that was carved, that I just carved. So that's going to be 54 items, or 57. And you can actually see craziness that's up in the top right corner. See how it says plus 57 files? Those are just the 57 files I carved. So now if you were just going to make another report, but like where are all the files or the pictures, for example, that were just carved out of here, I'd highlight these, export them out, add them to my case. Or just go ahead and tag them. So again, this is, depending on what questions you're trying to ask, this tool is kind of like a scalpel blade that you can get down very quickly, grab items, and pull them off. The tagging that you do in here eventually can give you a nifty looking report that's good for an investigator, but not really like your HR compliance legal people. It could be an additional note that you would have for a legal case, but it's not like something that's human readable to people. But it is pretty neat, because if we look at some of this stuff, let's say you could look at, from the report tables that were tagged or that I created, I could look at medium-sized JPEGs that I had a certain size that I was looking for, and I carved those out. You click on that, and you can see quickly, like, oh, here's all the pictures that it carved out that were a certain file size. And it gives you all the metadata for each one in the report. Now, of course, Xways has 1,000 options. So if you want to, you can only choose a handful of tagged items that will actually show their pictures. That could be useful if you don't want to give your compliance department a heart attack because you sent them a couple gigs of porn that they don't want to look at. Just giving them like the first 50 that, yes, this is definitely porn, and then they can see the rest of the files that existed. So you can also save space, because if you have to export all those pictures out, that would also be huge. So other items that are in this report. In like prefetch files, zip files, it's just kind of neat. And again, it's good for kind of an examiner because of the detail level that you get. And then depending on how sophisticated your audience is, you could just give this to them. But that's just kind of a quick, fast introduction to Xways. I skipped over a ton of things that make this tool even better than this, but that's a good start. Any questions?
How much is it?
Xways actually isn't bad. I think it was like, for a license, it was $1,000 or $1,800 or $2,000. So remember that
They have
this.
a free version?
No.
They have
Actually, wait.
trial?
They might have a trial. I don't remember. Yeah.
And what's it called? X-Ways?
X-Ways. Yep. If you buy NCase or FTK, you're looking at like $3 to $5 grand a year. So these are very serious tools. Really, you're going to be adding them in a shop where you're doing a lot of this type of work. Because again, you can see how quickly you can grab stuff. Okay.
How would a tool like this work with, say, a RAID array?
Oh man, so I don't have that example on me, but let's say that you took a drive
Said the
image.
right words.
All right? Yeah. So let's say you took a drive image, right? And someone was dumb and they didn't take a logical image of the RAID, they took physical. So what does that mean? You now have like 5 images, hard drive images, and then how do you recreate the RAID? This tool actually allows you to recreate a RAID off the images, off physical images.
Sweet.
Yeah. So pretty neat because like, oh, it was a RAID 5. Just put them in the order, put it back, and it just pops up like a normal, just like you would see this this image I have mounted right here. You just see it just like it would be a regular file. Actually. So, and then you can again start your investigation, start parsing, do all this stuff. Neat stuff. You can also open registries entries in here, but I'd recommend using Registry Explorer. That's also a fun tool, especially for hunting for like lots of activity. If someone like was trying to cover their tracks and they're like, I deleted all the stuff out of my registry, so you can't prove that I did anything. You're like, ha 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 ha, I have Registry Explorer, fool! Because even if you delete things in Registry Hive, that Registry Hive file, you can think of just like a file partition. So it's deleted, they're unallocated essentially, you can think about it. So they still exist. So as long as you have a tool that can look for them, you can pull them all out. Suckers! Cover your tracks? I don't think so, I found you. Anyway. You'd have to, so this has, I think it has some support for BitLocker, and I don't remember if it could do McAfee encryption, but essentially you still have to have the key.
Okay.
But if you have the key, you can essentially mount that image, add the key, and it'll decrypt it for you. Again, that's another huge time saver. I can't tell you how many times like we have to do like a full drive image, and we're like, we're gonna take a drive image. And if we have to manually take the drive out of the laptop, it's now encrypted. So you're like, encryption. So now you wait while it decrypts, and then you plug it in and you start imaging the drive, and you wait for it to image, and then you finally get the drive image that you're going to work on into your forensics tool, and then you wait for it to parse, and finally do some work.
And is a decrypt forensically sound? I don't know. Probably.
I don't know.
I don't think so.
I don't know. But
I'm surprised. Like a live decrypt on the device before you image it, I mean.
I remember yeah. So remember how we're talking about a log file? So X-Ways, as you're doing all these operations, changing, training things, or this is the training one, but everything that you do, every option that you're changing, everything that you're messing with is recorded in a log file. So you want to talk about chain of custody, who is working on it. You could have that in here as the user that logged in and started the image, and then what did they do to the image. You could see all of those details in here.
Well, it's just an HTML file, right? You can modify that.
Yes, but then again, when you do code of conduct, gosh dang it, code of custody, or chain of custody, my goodness, I haven't eaten yet, don't blame me. But it's a paper. If it's a paper, or even it's a digital file that's alongside the evidence.
The assumption is the attacker is not forensically analyzing their own disk image.
Yeah, the attacker isn't on the forensics boxes messing with it.
So like going back to the finding a coworker that's doing stuff they shouldn't at work,
yeah.
If you were to frame them and say that they are doing that.
Oh yeah. Whoa. If you get a forensic investigator that wants to frame somebody,
It's different. Okay.
that's going to be a different ballgame. It's going to be a lot harder, especially when they have access to all your tools and everything you're doing.
Sure. Okay.
So they're going to have a lot different knowledge. But if you're just a normal, if you're on an endpoint here and you're trying to hide your tracks through a lot of additional tools, you may be able to, depending on what they're doing, right? I mean, if they wipe the drive and write it with zeros, then of course you're screwed. Good luck. But yeah, you can find a lot.
So how do we get away with crimes? Do we shred our hard drives?
Of course you shred your hard drives. Keep it all in memory. Yep.
Right.
Yep. As soon as you're done, reboot it and keep going. That doesn't even work either, but can make it a lot harder. So yeah, that's all I got. Any other questions? All right, that's all we got for our last misec meeting.
The year.
Yep. the year. In 2018, I think our first talk will actually be by Kate Vida. She'll be giving a year in review of her transition from corporate work to contractor work and the adventures that she's been having. So look forward to that. Otherwise, I think we're going to head to Nightlight.
Yes.
There we go. All right. Bye, Internet. Have fun.
Bye, Internet. Run over it.